Yeah, go, go, go.
Okay,
This lighting's terrible.
we are live. Your lighting's fine, you're fine. All right, we're live.
Awesome.
Thank you to everyone for joining. We've got loads of content, so we're going to dive straight in. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping first. So we are going to record this event. So we'll share the recording with everybody afterwards. If you've got any comments or questions as we go, please just pop them in the comment section and we will get to them all at the end. Our panel is going to talk for about 30 minutes and then we'll get to some time for Q&A after that. We've got an absolutely amazing panel and host today. I'm really excited for today's event. It's also the last Striving event of the year, which is pretty exciting as well. So to introduce our host, Hung Lee, whose lighting is great, even if he is concerned. I'm sure most of you know Hung from his many speaking gigs across the globe and Recruiting Brain Food. If you aren't signed up for Recruiting Brain Food, you should be, and you should probably go and do that now. I was lucky enough to be introduced to Hung a few years ago, and he's always been incredibly generous with his time, his knowledge, and just generally helping out. So I'm very grateful to be able to call Hung a friend and be able to call on him for days like today. So with that, I'll hand over to Hung.
Thank you very much, Laura, and well done on putting this series together. I know how hard it is to do webinars, do live streams on a consistent basis, especially getting people to do stuff. So well done on putting it all together. Hopefully, this has been useful for the audience, and you're going to keep doing it for next year and beyond. So, folks, listen, welcome. I'm really honored to be taking part in this, and it's going to be really educational for me as well as everyone else. Today, we're going to be giving 2022 a wrap up and an overview, as well as doing some forecasting and some projections for 2023 as well. So I'm sure everyone has been completely discombobulated again from another crazy year in recruitment. Have a think about the things that have happened this year that have caused you to stop and reflect. What are the things that you think you'll be doing differently for next year? Have them in the back of your mind. Pop them into the comments or in the questions if you in the comments below, actually, if you want for us to address them towards the end of this show, and we'll be happy to dive into it. But let's introduce our guest first of all. We've got a wonderful panel to join us today, so let's go sort of from left to right as I see it. Simon, can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, sir?
Yeah, Simon Bernadino. So I'm a director at the Lab 17. We've been operating for 3 years, partnering with different companies at different stages of growth, helping them with their needs and challenges across talent acquisition and also people development.
Fantastic. And Emer, I can see you down there. Can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, my name's Emer. I'm the head of people and talent at a small startup called Simply Wall Street. And I've been here for about 3 years.
Fantastic stuff. And Pam, can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hi, I'm Pam, everyone. So I currently work as head of talent at Harrison AI. Been here the last few years, and we are creating AI solutions across the healthcare space. So we've got awesome AI solutions in IVF, medical imaging, pathology. So it's a pretty exciting space to be part of. Great to be here.
Fantastic. And folks, I'll be asking questions sort of broadly, but also individually. If you ever want to interrupt or, talk over sort of each other, please do that. I think it's totally okay to have an open conversation and not be completely, feeling as if you can't speak. So let's just throw one out there straight away. In a crazy world where obviously change is going to be the consistent theme, and oftentimes like radical, unexpected, and significant change, as we've seen over the last 2-3 years or so, it's really important for us, I think, to have a good handle as to where we actually get information, like where are we getting market intelligence, where are we kind of being sensitive to things that are happening, in order for us to just get ahead of that sort of problem or drama before it arrives. I wonder whether you guys should share with us some of your tips, your thoughts, your sources. Where do you actually make sure that you're well educated so that you can prepare for these eventualities? Any thoughts on this? Why don't I go with, actually, I'm going to go with Pam on this first. Do you want to give this one a shot?
Yeah, sure. So look, my go-to number of sources, but I love reading the LinkedIn Global Talent Trends reports. They're already out now for 2022, and there's one in particular for Australia, which is really interesting to read those insights. But I also love following thought leaders across the space. So Hung, you're one of them. Love the Brain Food newsletter. Have signed up. another plug there. But also, attending events and meetups. They're becoming more and more common post-COVID world. So obviously there's our Sydney Talent Meetup. I didn't mean to do a plug there, but it is a good place to learn and keep ahead of trends. But there's also, really cool events run by Andrea Kirby, obviously ATC recently, which is a yearly event. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of, I think, thought leaders to follow, events, meetups to go to, and there's obviously industry relevant reports that are out there.
Yeah, and just all of those things I think super relevant. So the industry reports from places like LinkedIn, I think, are super relevant, especially as LinkedIn are one of the few platforms that are able to commentate in a very broad sense, because they do have, I think, maybe 1 billion people on record or something. Like really, not all, obviously the entire world, but a significant proportion of certainly knowledge workers are on LinkedIn, and they're able to commentate really authoritatively on this, and they've got freely published information. So go ahead and check that out. Make sure you're just on top of it. And
they've got good data as well.
Yep,
like,
absolutely.
But LinkedIn, it's the data really that you look out for.
You look at LinkedIn, I would say people like Indeed, you look at companies that have this huge ability to aggregate or simply have the user volume to be able to tell you stuff that's significant. They're all like producing interesting data now. So it's worth just thinking about which organizations have that scale, sign up to their blogs, sign up to whatever it is that they're doing, and make sure you're getting that access. However, there's another form of data that Pam has mentioned, which is that kind of community generated, almost collective intelligence, right? And that's like critically important because it's people that are doing the same job as you at the coalface that are encountering issues that maybe don't sort of ever reach the media, or they don't reach the media for another couple of months down the track. But if it's happening to those people there, they know about it. They can circulate it peer to peer, and that's where you get sort of some advance notice.
Well, so yeah, actually, Hung,
go ahead.
That's Emer? That was the first thing that I was thinking of when you were talking, because that's what I found the hardest in the last year is where do we get information that's relevant and up to date? Because everything has been so crazy. It was like, we don't have people, we've got too much people, the market's changing, we're working from home. Like, it was just so hard in the last year to keep up with everything that was going on. Like, even if you went onto government websites, are we working from home? Are we not? What's the rules? And I think that the community has been really important for me, especially in my last couple of years, like learning about everything that I was doing, but even more so in the last year, like going out to that network and finding out, what are the salaries people are on, getting real salary data, not paying 10 grand for, Aon data that's 6 months old anyways, or finding out like what companies are doing from a legal perspective, whether people are coming into the office or not. So I think the community side of things has shown to be way more prevalent in the last year. And what I would say to anyone listening on this is, if ever you see me putting up a survey, I know, like, do it, fill it in. I do get only about 20 people reply, and usually it's because I've messaged them all directly to fill in the survey for me. But like, that is, putting up those findings, like that is so important for us all. Like, and if we all kind of band together to give us that information, I think that's where we're going to get real-time data.
Yeah, can everyone who's watching this make a commitment to do a survey today? Just do it. Just do it. Contribute to the community. No, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I think sometimes that that ability to tap collective intelligence, I think, is actually going to be like a superpower for people in the world of work. Certainly in the work that we're doing in recruiting. I mean, in many respects, we've always been people that are very good at capturing collective intelligence because of the nature of the job. But we need to apply that to the wider economic environment, because that's going to give us the sort of input that simply your competitors are not necessarily going to have. So I think building relationships with network, I would say that's definitely one of the things I would recommend people invest time in. Like intentionally building a network of colleagues, friends, collegiates, so that you can use that network, they can use you as part of that network to get better information and intelligence. You can't just, you might be lucky and just rely on that happening. If you're a charismatic dude like Simon, maybe that the network just comes at you. But most people don't have Simon's charisma, folks. So you got to...
Go ahead.
No, you got to apply effort. You got to simply say, you know what, I'm going to spend time building a network. Just add people on LinkedIn if that's basically what you got to do. But then try and reach out to people, join those communities, and make sure you contribute to them. In fact, if anybody's got a bit of time, why don't you take the Sydney meetup community link? I think it's on Facebook, isn't it? And just stick it in the comments on LinkedIn there. And everyone who's in Sydney, go and join that. I think Melbourne has one as well.
There's a recruitment meetup. There's the Slack channel as well. Like, we should be adding all those links in. I'm sure everyone's on them.
Yeah, well, just stick them in anywhere. You'd be surprised. There'll be people out there that might be just watching this and they've heard about it, but they, didn't know where the link was, and that's the last thing they knew. And before you know it wasn't there. So share that link, folks. Let's see it, and let's hope everyone sort of joins those groups. Simon, let's go to you on this. What are your thoughts on market intelligence? We've talked about tapping into some of these big companies that have a huge amount of data. Talk about collective intelligence. Are there any other ways in which we could kind of figure out what's going on?
Yeah, look, I think building on that, like Talent Down Under and Early Work, great communities as well. But I think for me, like keeping it really basic and human first is just kind of making sure that we're tapping into internal discussions. Like I know at the Lab 17, we've got a team of 16 people working across numerous organizations at different stages of growth. So that internal data bank of knowledge, but also from my perspective, connecting with leaders, founders, hiring managers, and just really understanding what their challenges are, what's keeping them up at night, and trying to build on that knowledge and that sharing of challenges to really sort of tap into what's going on in the market for different people. But I think also following different VCs. If you look at Down Under, we've had Blackbird and Square Peg announce massive funds recently. So I think they're always a good indicator of what's to come. They're looking at funds of like $1 billion and $550 million respectively. So I imagine going into 2023 they plan to do something with that. So yeah, just leveraging your communities and looking for different, I guess, personalized approaches to tap into data. Like I think for myself, past couple of years being an introvert, I probably cocooned myself into my home office and forgot what it's like to sort of get out there and meet in person and just have those human connections.
Yeah, I think that it's very easy to be comfortable, isn't it? Especially if you live in a palatial sort of apartment like you do, Si. It's easy to kind of just cocoon yourself in those spaces, but you got to get out there and you have to interact. And I think you've tapped into actually maybe the third big component where you might get information, which is of course your hiring managers and your candidates, because they're another type of person that's actually in there, and they're going to have information that you don't. That's always been that sort of non-published information. That's always been the recruiter's cutting edge. When you have if you have conversation with 10 candidates in your field, you're going to walk away from those 10 conversations with more information than any journalist. You are going to be ahead of those people in terms of what's going on in that sort of sector. So spend some time speaking to your candidates. Or better yet, create spaces for those candidates to come to you and then have those conversations in a more efficient way. So lots of ways in which we could collect that information. Okay, let's move on to talk a little bit about what you think has happened in 2022. With all of the kind of movements that we've seen. I can't even remember, last month, never mind earlier in the year. But what can you see from a recruiting perspective has been like a trend or a change that's occurred in 2022 that you think will persist into 2023? Any thoughts on this? I'll throw it open to anybody.
I mean, the main one is obviously in my hybrid working, essentially. Not necessarily in terms of recruitment, but
what is the atmosphere for flexible working in Australia? Because we're starting to see in different parts of the world, or at least maybe in certain prominent examples, where a boss is now getting the whip hand back in the sense of maybe we're heading into a recessionary environment. yes, candidates have been able to argue the toss for the last 18 months because of COVID, because we want to do well with workers, etc. But you know what? Wages are too high, demands are too high, recession's coming. Now's our opportunity to pull people back to the office. Has that been a conversation that's been occurring in Australia?
So
I
I've
haven't
seen
seen it here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Pam. Let's go to you first.
Look, it's contrary to what employees want. I think it's safe to say flexible working, having a work-life balance is a high priority. In fact, flexible working is number one, according to the LinkedIn survey data for candidates. So it's interesting to see the trend that, again, I'm going to reference the LinkedIn data, but there's been less remote jobs posted in the last few months. So we're seeing that trend downwards, but there's still a high rate of applications to remote roles or remote friendly roles. So the demand is still there. And even just kind of collectively, we know that this is what candidates want, but we are seeing some organizations who are, I think, quite fearsome going into an uncertain, potentially recessionary period coming up. Some are starting to mandate certain days in the office, or like even come back 5 days. I won't name and shame, or I don't mean to name and shame, but like there are some companies that are doing that, and I know their employees are looking because they're calling me saying, hey, my employee's making me come back 5 days, So I think the remote working period, the remote friendly or even hybrid, and allowing people the choice how many days, I feel like that should be here to stay, but not all employees are necessarily heeding that. And I'm actually not entirely sure why. So I'd be keen to know if you guys have an idea, because it's not as if productivity dipped during this period. So
that is actually in dispute, because I think the bosses think the productivity has dipped, and there's that dispute between the employees of self-reported productivity increase, but the bosses are saying, look, we don't think that's the case. So yeah, folks, Pam's actually given us a clue as to how to figure this out. Have you yourself in your own business started to hear from your clients, your internal clients, your hiring managers, starting to say, yeah, we'll take this one, it's on-prem? Have there been a greater frequency of on-prem jobs that have been opened up that you're recruiting for than they are remote? There's another way to do it. You don't necessarily have to convert a remote job back to on-prem. You simply have to stop creating remote jobs. You say, all right, yeah, we've got a new vacancy, but it's on-prem. And over the course of time, then you can kind of wash out the ones that are flexible and keep them, the ones that are left are going to be, come to the office. If you start seeing that pattern, then basically it's starting to happen. Go ahead, Si.
Yeah, look, I think it's the balance has shifted a little bit more over the past 6 to 9 months. Like I'm seeing that still, flexible is highly desired, but I am speaking to more people more often that actually, I wouldn't mind going to the office, 2 or 3 times a week. But I still definitely think the flexibility is high on people's list. But look, I think from an organizational perspective, I think, the past couple of years has really highlighted or catapulted well-being to the forefront of what employers have to be, offer potential employees, and I think that trend should continue. Obviously, the flexible or hybrid approach should continue, but I think now there's going to be a shift to getting back to focusing on performance as well. So I don't know from a founder's perspective if it's about obviously a dip in productivity is always going to be a concern, but I think the remote element is also highlighted accountability as well. So I think performance and accountability over the next 12 months are going to come back to the forefront. And if you look at, I guess, the redundancies and reorgs and stuff like that, there's a heavier emphasis on businesses to actually have a look at what resources or what individuals we have and how we're going to make it work with those individuals. How can we develop the talent that we have?
You know what? You've just introduced a really interesting point. Like another way in which you could kind of try and read the runes, if you like, read the tea leaves, is if there are redundancies in a particular business. Have we tracked like the distribution of the location of those people that are being made redundant? Are the people who are remote working, is there a higher percentage of those folks being made redundant compared to on-premise? And if so, that might be a little bit of an indication, like a soft indication, unstated indication that your company's heading back the other way or pulling back the permissiveness. So it could be either way, though. It could be that a remote worker is off premise. It may be cheaper to run as that person. The cost of employment's lower, so maybe it's on premise that people get is where the cuts happen. But it's one of those like internal bits of research you could do. If you're working for, let's say, a significantly sized business and you've made 10% cuts, how many of those are remote workers? Might be interesting to observe. What are your thoughts on this, Emer? You got some, the brow is furrowed. I think you want to say something here.
I know, no, because I was like, I'm literally going through this at the moment. We had to make some redundancies in our business, and so we were cutting down the size of our office. And so I was looking at lots of options of office space, and in that process, reach out to Slack communities because I thought we could share offices, and the number of people that are actually trying to downsize their office as well, and I suppose going into co-working spaces, like small co-working spaces, has actually boomed a little bit. So WeWork is probably doing a very good job right now. But there's a lot of, if you think about it, like companies are thinking about, yes, the productivity of people working remote and how do I keep them engaged as well and brought into the business and building that community. Then also like, if you're paying 15 grand for an office, 30 grand for an office and nobody's coming in, or actually so many people, the offices that I went to, everyone's either coming in on Tuesday or Thursday. No one's in on Mondays and Fridays. Like it's just this big thing that nobody's using it on Mondays and Fridays. So there's like, it's a really interesting way in which how people are working now, and they might want to come into the office like 1 or 2 days a week. But if we all want to come in Tuesdays and Thursdays in these offices, like it's still not really going to work. So I think it's interesting to look at. And also businesses are like all thinking about how do I survive right now? And so the change in which how they're thinking about commercially, it might not be as more long-term strategy of what they're trying to do. It's where am I going to get my profits for now going forward? And that's the shift in mindset. It's not like long-term growth. It's like, how am I just going to survive this?
I'll introduce a controversy here, right? Because why not like pep everyone up a little bit? But what if I said this? Good culture is all about long runway. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
So what? You see all these amazing cultures. You say, yeah, this company's amazing culture. Guess what? They've just raised 100 million quid or whatever it is. That's why they got amazing culture, because they got loaded. But when the money is cut off and they're running down, oh, we've got 3 weeks to survive. Guess what? That culture is going to turn what feels like toxicity, because everyone is like hands to the tiller trying to sort this out. So I think it's really interesting to observe some of the companies that have popped over the last 12 months or so. You go back to some of all the records, you do a Google search and you filter it against a time filter as to when sort of they raise money. The Glassdoor ratings are well high. They've got all these sort of permissions for the employees and all the rest of it. And everyone thinks, what a wonderful place to work. It was wonderful when they had loads of money. It was wonderful when we were in a growth market, when, you could be a mediocre company and still be, doing extremely well. But when the crap hits the fan, let's say there is a recessionary environment, globally, that might be the case. I'm not sure what the situation is specifically in Australia or even regionally within Australia, because there's always going to be variation, even sectorally. But if there's a crunch in terms of everyone's confidence is going down, I just wonder whether people are going to start seeing the real business. And if you've ever worked for a company that's literally week by week, by the way, folks, that there's none of this like permissiveness in that business. You can't actually do it. You have to be a hard ass. Otherwise your business goes under. So yeah, it'd be interesting to know what that tenor is and what our role is, right? Because as a recruiter, HR people, we might have to play both sides. We might have played the side of evangelizing about how wonderful our culture is. But then, if we're still in situ, when, really we're in profit making mode, we're in revenue generation mode, we've got to kind of also represent in that respect as well. So going to be interesting how we present that from an EB perspective, how we make that sort of attractive to people that might want to come with us. Let's talk about that. Simon, tagging on to your comment about well-being, the centricity of employees going forward. do you think that is survivable, let's say, in a tougher economic environment? Like as I've described, we've got 6 months to run. We've got 3 months to go before we run out of cash. Like how do we talk about well-being there? You're not gonna Elon Musk it and be that type of guy.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think as well, seizing on what's been going on over the past kind of 6 to 12 months, like there's always that, I guess, question in the back of people's mind when you see an organization downsizing or letting people go. There's always going to be that PR lens where it's due to the market, it's due to a pending recession. But I mean, I've always wondered, is there a blend of performance issues? Is our founders or leaders jumping on an opportunity to potentially downsize their workforce to protect that runway that you alluded to, Hung? So I think it's always that question's always been interesting for me as well. But yeah, look, I think as budgets get tighter, I think wellness and its importance shouldn't diminish. But I think a true culture really will sort of come to the top or shine through in these tougher times. And it's got to be led from the top down. It's got to be, that culture has got to be built by your leaders and embraced by your leaders, and that'll trickle down through the rest of the organization.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's basically you'll see the truth in adversity, right? And I guess that's a short way of describing what I'm saying here. It's very nice to be nice when it's very easy to be nice when basically you've got comfort. And I think this goes to personal level as well. Like when the stress is really on, are you behaving in a way, or are you treating people? Have your values changed in any way? That's going to be a good litmus test as to what type of business you're at. Hopefully, the companies that might be thinking profit sort of related now can recall back during the COVID sort of the first time round, how businesses behaved then, because there were also stresses, but certain companies did think, what, we've got to put sort of employees ahead of everyone else. Again, folks, have a think about where you're at in your own business. When the beat hits the fan, do you know how you're going to behave as a business? And that will be a truer measure of where you're at from a cultural perspective. Let's talk about some more practical stuff. What's happened in 2022 from a recruitment technology perspective that's been interesting for you guys that you thought, what, that's cool. I'm glad that's happened, and we're definitely going to use this going forward. Has there been any innovation? It seems to me still using the same kind of stuff. I mean, has there been anything that's caused you to think, yes, that's actually quite wonderful?
We're like, no.
I've just been at this point filling bums on seats and finally had a break in our hiring recently to be able to think about technology and automation a little bit more beyond the basics. So, I mean, for us, I know there's been some pretty cool TA automation things out there, but we haven't spent our time significantly investing at this point. There's a lot of top of funnel stuff, like around sourcing, and that's actually where the biggest time suck is in recruitment. There's a lot of kind of AI tools around that bit that I've seen in market, but I'll be curious to hear, what you guys are seeing and what you'd be edging towards.
Yeah, good point. When you're recruiting and it's maxed out, it's hard to actually get your head up and have a look at stuff. It's one of the problems in our jobs, actually, because we're, when there is a recruitment push, typically our time just gets bled into it and we don't have the time to think and experiment. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether, any of the other panelists have encountered something that's made you go, wow, that's interesting. That might actually make a difference. Any thoughts on this side? Have you encountered anything?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to be able to help too much on this one because my perspective is actually probably in the opposite direction and still pushing back for the human element of what we do. Talent acquisition as a craft. I think, it's great. You can get AI stuff and you can get some tools that can automate outreach for you and some processes. But, the results that we're seeing across the board is personalization is still, the number one, tip or trick to success. So I'm probably pushing in the opposite direction. And if anything, I think the experiences that I've had over the past 12 months is more of a shift in mindset with business leaders, founders, or stakeholders. And I guess really making them realize, what the talent function does and the people development functions do at organizations. So I think my approach has been more focused on actually getting time from key stakeholders or founders and taking them through talent pools and understanding, what the market is like at the moment. I think over my career, I've always encountered, hiring managers saying, go get me these people from this company, which I think is the best company. But more recently, have had time given from stakeholders where they want to sit down and understand the data, like understand where the talent pools are, and I guess the work or investment that's required to get them.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever.
I don't think you can automate that, unfortunately.
No, you can always. In fact, that's where if you do automate something, that's where it hopefully frees up the time for you to apply exactly that type of relationship building.
I mean, if someone can automate the education piece around what talent acquisition people do, maybe that would help the industry.
Just strap the hiring managers, just put one of those headsets onto them, just like put it in their sleep or something. Maybe you could record some audio and they can play it when they're sleeping, and they can kind of through the subconscious they can just be educated that way. Okay, Emer, how about you? Yeah, have you encountered anything that was interesting that's worth talking about?
No, I was like, I'm trying to think. I can't. But it brings you back to a really interesting point. It's like I do firmly believe that a lot of times that recruitment is one of those things where the business actually doesn't really understand what is involved, and there's so much involved. And then there's a perception in the market that recruiters are not coming back to you, or they're sending automated messages or whatever it is. And it's like, well, you can't win. If you're going back to every single person, how do you have time to recruit? And then you might have too many roles on because the business doesn't believe in function or whatever it is. And going back to Pam's point, it's like, you sometimes don't even get a second to think about how you can improve a process or an email template or make something a bit more personalized. And I think fundamentally, that piece probably does have to change.
Yeah, I think this is one of the challenges that we have. Maybe it's something we can't shirk either, in the sense that we can continue digging manually as hard as we can, but there's going to be a limit to how deep a ditch we can dig, if you like. Yeah, that's probably a terrible metaphor, but let's just go with it, guys. You're digging a ditch manually, it's going to take you ages, right? Would it not be better if you had a bulldozer or something? At some point you have to invest in some automation. Good news is, folks, Recruiting Brain Food is doing exactly this topic this Friday.
I knew it.
Automation hacks. It's always a plug. Recruitment automation hacks you need to have for 2023. We've got some amazing guests to come on. They're going to talk to us about it, particularly things that they've done to be more efficient. And what I like about this, they're not corporate people. They're all like, everyone's saying, just buy these things, it's going to cost you like 20 million quid. No, we're talking about consumer level hacks where an individual recruiter can step in and think, you know what, it's actually maybe really fast because I can now do this in a very automated way. I think you have to sign up to it. You're going to have to either stay up late or watch it and record, because it's on 2 p.m. UK time, but well worth paying attention to.
You send us the recording?
No, I don't send recordings. Come on, Pam. I'm too busy. I'm maxed out.
Haven't you automated the send off? I mean,
it will actually be on my LinkedIn. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you should be able to track it down from there, and it will be available. But I'm looking forward to it because we've got some really interesting people that have. I think again, I'm attracted to these folks because they're not corporate people, and they've just, as one person, I think they can do the work of 5, and you think that's actually useful. So there's 2 things I would say that recruiters need to equip themselves into 2023. One we've already talked about: better network, better market intelligence. The second thing I would say is that you need to actually be more equipped to use tooling to get more productive. Because one of the messages, I think, if you go into a more defensive environment, is that you're going to be asked to do more with less, basically. Whereas before you might have a team of 10, suddenly you got a team of 5. Okay, well, that team of 5 is going to have to do more. And so there's technologies out there that can help you at a how do you call it, at a single operator level. So I'll give you an example. There's like visualization tools right now that can really do just rapidly produce commercial level quality animation on charts that you could literally do with no training. Whereas previously that would require someone's design, or maybe you'd outsource it to somebody, but no, they can produce it right here and now. Flourish data, check it out. You can just sign up to that consumer level. You can suddenly produce like literally this looks pro as F, and an individual could do this. Have a look at generative AI. I don't know whether any of you have played around with some of this type of stuff. Crazy text to image, text to video. You type something in and it produces something. So I could say, yeah, I want to see Simon like dunk a basketball in front of a kangaroo. And it would generate an image of Simon dunking a basketball. And it's like, how the heck did that happen? But basically, it suddenly thinks, you know what? Whereas previously I might need a recruitment marketer or a designer to do this, I can actually just like interact with this AI and it will produce it for you. Jasper AI, another thing that I'm experimenting with, which is basically generative text. So what this thing does is it's ingested the internet, essentially, ridiculously so. But they say they've read everything on the internet. And if you type in some key terms that you're going to write about, it will look at every article that has those key terms and then automatically generates you a sentence that you can then edit. But then it will tell you, oh, this is how it looks like. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to use this to write everything I'm doing, but I can see that maybe this could take care of the drafting aspect. And that could cut time. So there's tons of stuff out there at consumer level that I think is really interesting. We recruiters need to get good at it, because if we don't, someone else is gonna. And yeah, then we'll rely on them. So I think we need to up level our ability to use some of these tools. They're going to help you get better. Okay, sign up to the show on Friday. You'll know all about it.
Add a third thing, just quickly. Like, yes, always be networking. I call it ABN, very important. Obviously, automation tools. I love that. That's a great pitch for your upcoming upcoming session. But the third thing, I think, yes, automation is all well and good to get that initial like funnel going or to get that outreach to help you with that. But that means nothing if you don't have a good brand behind you and you haven't invested in a good employer brand. Nobody's going to want to engage with you further or reply. So the third thing I would say you've got to be investing in and I think where we need to broaden our skills in TA, it's not just marketing, it's kind of a blend of both worlds, but we need to get really good at employer branding and all the things we can do to make our company stand out and be a place that everyone's proud to work and that people will actually respond favorably to when they come across your material online.
I think quite right. But a question back to you then, Pam, how do you get good at employer branding? Like, what are the things that recruiters need to get good at?
Yeah, so copywriting, it's an underrated skill. You need to be good at crafting words. They're everywhere. You use them on LinkedIn posts, you use them on your adverts. It's such an underrated skill. The amount of recruiters that don't know how to string sentences together in an engaging way, I think it's a skill that we all need to get better at. There are courses you can do online. There are actually employer branding courses. There's specialists that I'm happy to link people to if they want to know. Like there are actual courses you can do around the branding aspect. It's essentially your reputation. There's also, people you can connect with that are employer branding specialists to brush up your knowledge. We did do our first Sydney Talent meetup on this. So if you want to Google that, you can and reach out to those folks. I'm sure they'd be open to having a chat. But it's also simple things you can do, right? In recruitment, you can do these videos, day in the life of profiles, like, video your culture and your people that are hiring and the teams at the same time. I did one recently on like iMovie. It costs you nothing, but the engagement is huge. Like, as an example, we're looking for a tech recruiter and we did a quick video of that and we had no applicants for the role. And then we suddenly had heaps and 5 that are actually amazing in the space of a day. So like the power and the reach of video content is huge and I think underutilized. So they are all things that add to your employer brand, right? Showcasing your culture, what it's like to work, your values, all those sorts of things. And there are really quick ways that you can upskill yourself.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We need to get better and more fluent at general like rich media type tools. As you're mentioning with things like iMovie, and these days even a mobile phone will have the devices and the apps will have lots of editing opportunities within the device. So all of us are walking around with like a film studio in our pockets, and you could really make better use of it. Again, it's one of these things where I know a lot of people, particularly the older generation, of which I am fully a part of. By the way, I shocked someone yesterday by revealing some information from the 1980s, and they couldn't believe it. So yeah, actually, I'm from the 80s. Anyway, but it's like, okay, this technology is here. You can see how people are using it. You can produce some incredible stuff at like almost zero cost of production, right? In terms of like, if you examined what you could do with a mobile phone alone, you would say that's zero cost of production, apart from the time that you've took to learn it. It is another skill. Let's put that in as another skill that you need to learn how to do. There's so many ways in which people are consuming information these days. There's, by the way, no question people are moving off desktop onto mobile. No question people are moving off text onto video. So, hey, recruiters who are still dependent on desktop and text, we've got to up our game. It reminds me very much of back in the day, again, aging myself, back in the day when the job was like phone-based. It wasn't a computer, right? It's like literally you calling people up using paper. There were a bunch of recruiters that failed to migrate to the internet era and failed to migrate to the keyboard era. I remember watching my boss, and he was like typing, literally finger jabbing his keyboard like this, right? Yeah, and I was thinking, this guy's not going to make it.
I still
He's
like
not going to make it.
I still like writing. So.
the pace of his email, like I can get 10 emails out and he hasn't even finished a sentence. So don't tell me I'm going to outcompete him. I saw that and thought I'm outcompete him. So we're at that kind of cusp again, where we're moving to mobile, we're moving to video. Okay, are you going to be able to move and track with the times here? Because otherwise you'll be left behind. So yeah, really good point, Pam. So yeah, follow Pam's Instagram. She's on this. No.
No. Well, you know what? If you want, you mentioned an interesting point to how you could just like bash out like 10 articles like fairly quickly, and you must do because you do so much writing. But if you want to get good at something, if you want to get good at writing, you have to practice. You have to like. Inspiration finds you everywhere, every day. Like I use notes on my phone when I have an idea. Sometimes it comes at midnight when I'm just quiet or in the shower when there's no distractions. Like just practice, just write something, iterate on it, edit, and eventually it'll start flowing. Like and creativity is everywhere. It's floating around. You just pick it. So
do you know how Stephen King, the author? So this is a bit of a segue, folks, but we're gonna dive straight into this segue. You've heard of Stephen King, right? The horror author. I think he's the most published author, maybe just behind J.K. Rowling. But in terms of like the numbers of books that have gone beyond a certain sale numbers, it's him. And he does like 2 books a year at ridiculous pace. And he does exactly this. He sits down and writes 3,000 words before he does anything. And he says he does that without any thought as to what he's writing. So he doesn't wait for inspiration to strike. He sits at the key, opens up his typewriter, wherever he is, he just blasts it out. And he says that it's just getting into the rhythm of it, getting into the zen of it, right? Yeah. So he's not like thinking, oh, I've got a great idea, I'm write it down. No, he's saying the typing creates the ideas.
It does,
right?
Yeah.
So this is what we've got to learn as recruiters. And again, you look at any creative person, they're not sitting there waiting for inspiration and then putting it together. They're actually doing the thing, consistently doing the thing, and inspiration just happens all the time through the doing. So imagine you're shooting video, imagine you're taking photos, imagine you're writing something or whatever you're doing. You've got to do the action, and then you'll have the creativity come at you. And the inspiration will emerge as a result of that. If you stop doing it, you wait and you try and analyze it, not happening. Creativity does not come from analysis.
Yeah.
Comes from action. Okay, segue over. Let's get back on track. Let's forward plan 2023. What do you think is going to happen in 2023 on a broad sense? So we're going to talk about a few elements here. So let's talk about the broader macroeconomic environment. Where, Simon, you're talking about investment happening, which is great. Where is the general sort of atmosphere heading towards in 2023 in Australia? Economically, Si, go you.
Economically, yeah. Well, I think obviously with what's happening in markets and pending recessions and how severe or not severe they may be in Australia. Australia seems to sidestep a lot of global things, so who knows? We may indeed sidestep it to a degree. But I think, from a talent perspective, there's, I've definitely seen a shift in terms of, considering opportunities and taking security, into consideration. So, is it a better option to consider that opportunity that's maybe more like a Volkswagen or an Audi versus a Porsche or a Ferrari? So I definitely think, job security and more importantly, the industry that individuals are working in is, something that is at the forefront of people's minds. And I think also, the desire to work at, the Facebooks, Googles, Apples, Amazons of the world, I think that's been shifting as well. The experience that a junior or mid-level candidate could get at 6 months in a fast-paced, tech startup versus, joining one of the behemoths, I think, the benefits of that far outweigh, joining one of those organizations, and the fact that they're not kind of immune to what's happening in the world with the recent layoffs as well is probably going to accelerate that perspective also.
Yeah, really good point. So I think job security is elevating up as a concern for candidates. So this is something you need to get ahead of when you're having conversations. You need to have that in your EB in some way. Talk about sort of where you're at as a business. And if you are a more mature business, you've got to lean into that. If you are a startup, doesn't mean it's all over, but it does mean that you need to understand that there is an increase in hesitation from the candidate community. So you've got either a choice to say, yes, we are a startup, we've got a 6-month runway, and just wash people out who have a different risk profile, but be honest with them on that. Or you can talk about, okay, here's the roadmap. You spend more time talking about where the longer direction is. I think all the talk about rapid growth, sort of hyperscaling, rocket ship stuff, that kind of talk is probably not going to have the same cachet as it has done before in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Like product roadmap, as a business, are we cash flow positive? Are we VC funded versus not? Those kinds of conversations are definitely at the forefront now, versus the perks and benefits and rocket ships and whatnot.
Yeah, so basically be aware of the general tenor for job security, and that's something to think about when we're approaching candidates. Okay, let's go to you, Emer. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen in 2023?
Yeah, everything Simon said, I absolutely agree with. I'm seeing the exact same thing. I think in 2023, like as Andrea has just said in the chat, it is interesting. There is still a lot of companies who are hiring. But things will shift in terms of what kind of roles they hire and obviously who goes where. And it will be interesting to see kind of what companies do in terms of whether junior level candidates or senior level candidates and what that market shift might be. But I think from a macro perspective, we're like Australia, yes, is probably not going to be as bad as the rest of the world, but we have been affected by, everything that's going on in the climate and floods, etc. And if that gets worse, the next couple of years, it's going to put pressure on everything. So, hopefully it's not going to be all doom and gloom and things don't go all downhill. But, there is going to be a lot of pressure for the next couple of years in terms of the macroeconomy and how much money disposable income people have and decisions that people are going to make. So we're not going to move as quickly into certain roles, and it is becoming more of an employer's market as such when people are going to hire. So
yeah, and there's a couple of elements of that, isn't there, Emer? So if it's shifting slightly more to employers, you can actually expect the bosses to take a little bit of advantage of that. So we've got to either have the conversation internally with the bosses and say, you know what, yes, we could be a hard ass and say back to the office, but there's a long-term penalty to pay for that. Particularly with existing staff, for instance, it's very hard for people who have worked in a flexible environment now for coming on to 2 years to then suddenly have to reshift back to on-premise. I think that's actually a real shocking kind of return. And I don't think you're going to do a great job of retaining staff by doing that.
And what I'm interested to see actually next year is salaries. What's going to happen with salaries? So obviously inflation's going up. Will companies pause on it? Will they not? Like, I think that the next 6 months is going to be quite interesting in terms of what everyone does there.
No, but what do you think is going to happen on that?
Well, to be honest, I think it's going to freeze slightly. I would be surprised. I think that a lot of companies, if they're not in trouble, they will be. Obviously, there is some industries that are still growing and are quite stable, but I do think that there is a lot of companies out there where they just won't have the budget to to do it essentially. And I don't know if there will be as many roles for people to say, well, I'm going to go. So I think the interesting piece there is how you treating your team internally as you go, because what happened in COVID, as you go back to like how you treat your team through that time, will people kind of feel that and feel how you're treating them through this process, and then the minute things get better, they're gone.
You know what?
I don't know. It's probably too controversial.
I know. I think we need to talk about it. I think salary inflation has been, prior 6 months ago, and this is how fast it moves, right? We're talking about in a couple of quarters. The recruiting challenge was salary inflation. It was like, oh my goodness, how are we gonna? Ridiculous candidates are asking for this amount. And it's like, what's going on? Well, guess what? The reason why we are moving into a recessionary environment is exactly because of the sense that there's too much. The cost of employment is too high. Hence, the interest rates are going to go up. Let's take the money out of the economy and make sure that the salary inflation is suppressed. So there's definitely that sense really coming from central governments really. So we as businesses will have to. Hang on, I've just got a private chat message. We've got 10 minutes left. Hon, get off the. All right, I get it. I don't know why private chats. Just say it publicly, Laura. If you need to move us on, just say so. It's all good.
Have you got your own show coming up later in the week, mate?
Yeah, I don't know, but I actually don't know where the questions are. I mean, I only just noticed the comments. Are the questions meant to be in comments, right? Are we meant to go through that?
Oh, she's coming in.
There she is, dropped in. What's happening, Laura? What's happening? Are we going to Q&A?
No, you can. There's been lots of comments, no direct questions. I want to turn Anthony's comment into a question though, but you carry on for now. I'll just let you know, don't talk forever. People want to eat their dinner. 6 o'clock.
You know what? That's totally fine. Folks, if you've got any questions, ask them and ask the comments in the comments section, should I say. I'll believe that's in LinkedIn anyway. So just comment on the thread and we're going to try and pick them up through StreamYard and we'll deal with those in a sec. So no questions to date. So ask us something and we'll see what's what. All right. So Pam, let's go to you. Actually, we've already gone to you, haven't we, Pam? We've done the forecast of 2023, which is going to be. So we've talked an EB. We've talked about the need to continue to have a strong conversation with hiring managers. We've talked about candidates sort of in terms of salary inflation. How do we handle that? What about the issue of remote? Like one of the ways in which companies can potentially continue to recruit, but also not pay huge amounts, is to remote the work. But not only remote the work, but to offshore the work. That may be one of the decisions. I can imagine a boss say, you know what, you're coming on premise, this is the salary. If not, job's off to Manila.
Yeah. I've sort of seen that starting to happen already. And, when you have cost pressures, you think about where you can get that labor cheaper, and offshore teams become a natural solution, particularly in tech world. So you're probably going to see more EOR arrangements in place if a company doesn't want to set up an entity in another organization. So I think preparing, as a talent team, you often get involved in these global mobility pieces. So thinking, is that going to happen, and what will you do in that situation, and thinking how to support teams as well when they are going remote, like when they do have an offshore team. That's going to be really important. There's a lot of cultural pieces and nuances to work through with that. So yeah, look, I do think we're going to see a rise in offshore. That's kind of natural. I also think certain industries will be probably thriving a little bit more in recessionary type periods than others. So people will tend to gravitate maybe towards like job security number one, right? So permanent roles, secure industries. So I think we'll probably see healthcare is definitely a secure, generally quite recession proof. I mean, people are going to get sick during good times and bad. So it's not going to experience, I think, as much cutbacks as other sectors. You've got government that generally tends to be more stable. Certain sectors in IT, particularly cybersecurity, will they are already on the rise in huge demand. Software engineer demand, I'm sure, will continue. Talent acquisition, I find that particular our subset, I find that interesting to see what's happening at the moment. Like, we kind of like the canaries in gold mines. A lot of us sort of got let go before we heard of all the onslaught of layoffs recently. We already started to see the breadcrumbs, I guess, and you can follow that. What will happen to us next year as a whole? That my prediction is probably, like, unfortunately, I don't think it looks great next year, but I'm hoping that by the end of the year it does pick up, as hopefully inflation does come under control. This is a huge, like, gamble, maybe by the end of next year, at least within Australia. So, you know, I think it is going to be a challenging period. So if anyone is out of a job and listening to this, maybe think about those industries and sectors where you're probably going to be more recession proof, right? So those ones I've mentioned, I think maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe education, online learning could be one as well, because I'm already seeing a lot of people reskilling, upskilling, which is a great thing to do, whether you're already employed or whether you're not employed right now. It's always good to be future-proofing your career, and investing in your education is a way to do that. And I think we'll see that trend go upwards heading into next year too. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, the boss has come back on. Are we going to questions? I'm terrified now.
Yeah, we've got 2 questions.
Pressure coming. Right. Shall we go to questions then, Laura? Yeah. Here's Andrew.
So
wow, it actually comes on screen. How cool.
Andrew's first.
Yeah. So let's read this out for people who are listening purely, you know, audio wise. So, who are the TA teams that are doing clever things to hold on to their recruiters when they're not recruiting? Will Emer go back to sales? Okay, that's 2 questions there. The first one I think is a serious one, Andrea. So let's deal with that. What are people doing to keep hold of recruiters when they're not recruiting? So I guess as a head of TA, you want to do this. You want to defend your department. You want to make sure people are still good jobs. But the companies decide to do a hiring freeze or a hiring slowdown. What are people doing? Folks, if you've got any comments, please make them in the comment section. Let's go to the panelists. Any thoughts on this? What would you do for recruiters when you're not recruiting? Can recruiters be repurposed?
Simon,
yeah,
you go.
Based on previous experiences, you kind of always see that pathway into, I guess, other, you know, potentially customer-facing opportunities or career pathways. Working, you know, TAs working closely with people development, or, you know, people business partnering opportunities as well. But I think there's no single solution, right? I think as TA leaders, obviously you've got a team that you've built, and you've built personal relationships with those individuals. So you kind of, you know, hopeful that you can give them a pathway that will, you know, potentially lead to another challenge or potentially another career. But I don't think there's a single solution.
Yeah, I think so. Basically, just again, rewinding back to COVID period, I think the time to do something, the strategic and operational efficiency stuff is now. So you got to sell that hard, basically. The way to do it is if we just accept that the job is just filling jobs, then yes, you're finished, you're gone. You've got to have a more strategic conversation internally, and this is up to the leaders to do that. You've got to position the function to say, we need to put the organization in a setting that it can be more efficient to recruit when the time is going to happen. That includes getting more technology in. That includes educating managers. That includes doing lots of stuff that is non-recruiting that you usually don't have the time to do. You're busy filling jobs. So that's something I think we need to sell hard on. Okay, let's go to the next question. We can't do everyone here, so we've got Aaron. Is it Gabriel? Yes, Gabriel Wilson. Any recommendations for a growing startup, 20 staff, looking to establish an internal people and culture function for the first time? We have no rules in place, and we're just starting to put in place to hire our first team member. So this is like, I don't think there's anybody doing the job, but they're looking to get someone in. Any recommendations as to what they should do? Again, I'll throw it open. Anybody want to give this a shot?
I feel like, Gabrielle, you should message me and I'll have a chat with you if you want. I can help you out. There's a few things there. Or Simon's team can go in.
Yeah, you can look up the labs, Gabrielle, and I'll run you through our offering.
Or you can ask MRI for free too.
No, sorry, Simon.
In the exact situation.
No, but honestly, let's come to the end of time. But actually, Gabriel, that's probably the best thing you could do is actually get someone in. So in other words, get a company in to just set the process. If you have no knowledge as to the function, and you've managed to grow the team to 20 without that person, then well done. But then get in a mini RPO type business, get them to set up the process. They can help you recruit the person that's going to come in. And you could even agree a contract to say, look, you're in there for 3 months, and then after that, we need to have a person in place to take over the running of it. That's probably the smoothest way to do it, rather than just roll the dice and hire someone in from outside in.
Because when you say tools, it's like you don't want to bring in the wrong tool that you have to like replace again. It's a lot of effort. There's no point. So getting in somebody who's been there, done that, knows what they're talking about will actually save you more time in the future.
Yeah. Sometimes if you've committed all your processes to a really crappy system, or you've spent like tons of time building a Google spreadsheet, suddenly your ATS, then you know what, you're going to run into some serious problems, because whenever things professionalized, it's going to have to be stripped out. And then everyone's got to relearn stuff. So yeah, get somebody else in. So one of those, like, don't fix the plumbing yourself. Get a pro in, Gabriel. Okay, that's about it. I think we're out of time. So thank you everyone for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the show. It's going to be it's been an interesting year to 2023. It's going to be even more interesting year 2020, sort of going forward next year. I would recommend the main thing you need to do is make sure you're connected in community with everyone else that is listening and kind of involved in community. So it's your best way to be secure for your business and for yourself. So make sure you keep talking with your peers. Okay, I'll throw it back to you, Laura. Take it away.
Awesome. No, thank you all. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all the great comments, Andrea. You've really sparked it up. So thank you as well. So yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks everyone. Thanks.